Meanwhile.
Dr. Dees, lately I've been having these strange mental states, or like thoughts that I myself can't even understand, nor the people that I talk to on a daily basis expressing my concern. Well, these thoughts have a similar connection, but I'm not sure if they're well connected or even thought out. My mind rushes with these mentioned thoughts that are unraveled, like the time when I asked my friends what their opinion was toward the outfit that I was wearing on that school night. But then I felt great relief after they confidently mentioned to me that I looked great. But it was a subgeneric response, and I wasn't very satisfied with their responses. So then I proceeded to ask my relatives the same question, especially to my mother. I was expecting my mother to give me a sincere and direct response, but she then proceeded to reply to my question with, "Oh, honey, you're an angel on this earth. You shouldn't be questioning your persona that way. Whatever you wear, you'll always look great in it." Both my friends and my mother's responses resonated through my mind, echoing, displeased by them, and I felt something. That something was just not right. And at this moment, I'm still questioning my friends and my relatives, especially my mother. So then, my question to you to clarify, Dr. Dees, is this true? Was I actually being told the truth? Or was I overall being teased with the truth? Or was this truth not near the actual reality?
What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with this person, this patient? What are his problems? In fact, who is this person? What is he doing in my clinic? Am I even qualified to be a therapist? For these types of people, and for the people waiting in line for it to be their turn to have their thoughts clarified. Okay. I think I got it. I'm an underqualified therapist who had to literally wiggle his way to gain my license, gain a reputation, gain an audience, as I had to sugarcoat my way to these accomplishments. Yes, that's it. I can sugarcoat my way out of this, and then I'll do the same with my next clients. Yes, I see where you are coming from. Although, visually you do have an interesting, physique. I'd say to further clarify your question, is that certainly the statements that were said to you were actually true. No doubt about it, you do indeed look great.
Dr. Dees was later fired for being underqualified.
Ah yes, communication. A basic skill that everyone is taught in their lifetime, specifically at an early age and later on nourished by the evil educational system. It can be perceived that way, but in reality it's not so evil. Anyways, at this early age, you know, that point in your lifetime when you were vulnerable, curious, unmannered, and generally being a big dependence to your parents who decided to procreate. Although you weren't just curious, you tended to experiment with the surroundings of this new world you just spawned in unwillingly, and basically having no general concept of structure and what the flaws of society actually are. Basically, the time when you were an infant, unknowing about the subjects that I just previously mentioned, but as well as unknowing the concept of communication. Specifically, communication is a generic skill that most, in fact, all Homo sapiens use on a daily basis to broadcast emotions, desires, and other categories of dialogue used towards other Homo sapiens. You might assume that the subject of communication is simple and subgeneric. Though, if you were to break it down to very simple terms and devoting some time to understand how one thing inclines onto the other, you might comprehend that the subject alone is quite difficult, as there are many subjects that must be taken into account when it comes to communication, and can have a variety of interpretations when properly observed. So, let's break down communication to a basic level of understanding.
When he at the
First and foremost, words. Words can carry a specific emotion or definition, obviously depending on how elastic the word can be, metaphorically speaking. Like how many different ways you can put a word together with other words to form a sentence that can give off a different tone each time.
What are you doing? You were supposed to turn!
Whether using words that can be superficial, like nice, good, awesome, sad, or angry. Superficial words don't tend to give off a big impact. That's only if your intended audience is children or speaking to the most nerve-wracking individuals. Though most people grow out of using superficial words, hopefully, and tend to expand their intellect using more heavily driven wording to make their claims much more impactful.
You get out!
Although using these superficial words can be viewed as basic vocabulary that can be understood by your tablet-enjoying toddler. On the other side of the spectrum, words can be heavy and more direct to their definition, such as charming, diverting, prodigious, inconsolable, and waspish.
No, ain't no more again!
Let's not forget that using more heavy words can make you appear more intellectually driven and/or appear to be as an individual who will tend to win in arguments of politics or how the answer is 9 but actually is 6. Or it can also be seen as an over-exaggeration of unnecessary wording, prompting you to potentially be criticized, but hey, it all depends on the person that is giving you that unconstructive criticism. But not only do you have to worry about the level of wording you should use, but also how fast or slow you want to talk. Sometimes speaking at a faster speed can cause you to even jam in your own sentences, potentially ruining your roast. All of these core subjects carry heavy importance, but as myself, and probably yourself included, wouldn't be able to understand how ancient humans communicated with themselves and perhaps did not understand the quotients to interpret emotions, and probably had to rely on grunts and gestures to simulate communication. Despite all of this reckless information, to say the least, society is starting to return to those events, in a similar fashion of course. But in this case, it isn't fashion, it's a concept of communicating with others, a concept of diverting information and analyzing it, and how much of this information is exposed and how it tends to be distributed and expressed accordingly. But you ask yourself, "Oh, 𝗟𝗓, why has this video all been about the subject of communication and not the subject of sugarcoating?" Well, without comprehending communication at first hand, you might assume I'm simply referring to a cooking process where you sugarcoat muffins, cookies, or some other consumable to make it sweet, hiding the bland, unflavored original taste. With this metaphor in mind, words not only depend on its speaker, but can be also used to your advantage as a form of weapon. Not like an actual weapon, but metaphorically when it comes to subjects where you must make solid points, such as within debates, critical thinking situations, or telling no to that one stalker that you have that miraculously has a crush on you, or telling your parents that you will not wear your Skechers to school because they aren't lit anymore. As students in an educational setting, clearly forming an argument with emotions or basic language, you will not make a reasonable impact on your audience. Okay, well, the one thing that you haven't been taught just yet is how to notice sugarcoating, or even the procedures and steps that it has to take to sniff out some sweet lies.
The time for reflection is over.
If that's the case, here are some respectable concepts of what the definition of sugarcoating is. To truthfully and reluctantly lie to someone's face to simply evade developing conflict or abroad. Or it can even mean, when confronted with a situation that requires acknowledgement, speaker tends to belittle it. Those were certainly some good descriptions of what it can potentially mean, but it's not fully yet comprehensible. Well, in accordance to the Urban Dictionary, to address an issue by speaking in a way that appears pleasant and not offensive. So, it might sound like gibberish or inconsistent, but allow me to break it down for you. To acknowledge the case of sugarcoating, it can come in a multitude of ways, both physically and mentally. What I mean by physically and mentally, I'm referring to its method of introduction, or how it's exposed during day-to-day communication. It can be observed during superficial conversations, like asking an individual what their favorite color is, what their favorite food is, what's their way of living, what's their personality traits, or even if they have affectionate feelings for you. or even during systematic scenarios such as debates, argumenting, persuasion, and even in more civil scenarios. As the definition states, it has a common theme of lying. It can be intentional or unintentional, but regardless of the scenario, there tends to be the theme of shielding oneself from harm, or by harming others. But let's not mention the fact that individuals who tend to be seen as weak-minded, or are a definitive definition of being weak-minded, don't really tend to preach sincerity or direct comments, as they tend to have an odd reaction when it comes to embracing the truth. Despite being sincere, it can be taken as inconsiderate for some reason. To further explain, some individuals who are not used to be given the truth directly and more of progressively tends to, as known in Spanish slang, respingar, which basically translated into lashing out. It is like telling a child the fact that the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, or other mythical being exists when in reality they don't. Well, if you still believe in these personas at an age that's being capable of thinking for yourself and not your parents thinking for you, I wish you the best of luck. As clarity tends to be a major issue in society since some never know the proper intentions of everyone unless analyzed and have an enlightened mentality. Now that I bring up analyzing, there are things that need to be taken into account when you are engaged in a situation that requires you to be sufficiently honest. It is that for certain, it doesn't take two heads to assure that you are being honest to an individual, regardless of the circumstances. Sometimes it's best to be honest, to stand your ground, or in fact, to be transparent as it later shows that you are a trustable individual and don't have any tricks under your sleeves. Though do note that expressing yourself is key and fundamentally important, as your form of expression can build your character, and having a keen skill to also understand expressions from others in a more of a transparent manner. But why is this a concept of thinking seen as normal behavior? Or is this behavior nature, or is it nurtured? Nature being, for instance, biological factors such as flight or fight response. Given to some unique circumstances, this method of behaving swiftly activates, as it's evolutionarily proven to have been useful. Nurture, on the other hand, are environmental factors, as this tends to be one of the most mutual key characteristics of a Homo sapien. Although one thing for certain is that those who preach sugarcoating are hiding a horrendous truth behind that falsified mask. Speaking up about your feelings or observations is something that should tentatively be upholded by everyone, as it fabricates a well-rounded resolution for all of us. That wraps up this video. I'm more than pleased for you to have devoted some time of your day to inherit some knowledge about society. And for certain, if you please leave a like and subscribe, more content like this will be on the work. Once again, thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. I will see you in my next video. Adios.